We'll jump into our next topic. I think, Riley, you got the slides. Go ahead and kick it over. All right. So our next topic is BAS Professional Sales Training 101. And all of us in the BAS industry, we're in a very, I'll say, a unique field. We represent both a physical and a digital product. And we represent it to very large buildings that have, they have many, many complicated situations going on. And of course, you know, we all have different use cases of buildings, right? We got anything from a school to a hospital to a military base to a, you know, like a huge campus of buildings like a university. And then within that space, we got to work with facilities people, technology people, executives, and with all that, as a salesperson in the space, somebody trying to create interest for your products or services, it truly becomes a challenge. Now, through the years, I've been very fortunate to work with some of the best salespeople in the industry. And I feel like I've gotten some really, really great information from them. And so with that, I feel very fortunate to bring this panel up. These are four individuals that all have excelled in selling in our industry. They each come with different backgrounds, different experience. And we're just going to do a panel conversation today and kind of go through some different topics, and we'll listen to the experts kind of give you guys some ideas on how to help you all be better out there in selling BAS. So first, I'd like to get started with introductions. So before we get going, if each one of you just introduce yourself briefly and a little bit about yourself.
My name is Julian Palacios. I'm Director of Sales and Business Development with Smart Buildings Academy. I've been in this industry since 2006, and that whole time in sales and marketing roles of various levels of responsibility. And super excited to be here. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Julian.
Ed Merwin, Director of Strategic Business with Tridium. Been in the industry 48 years, starting on the rooftop and moving into sales quickly. So it was a lot more fun. I was a lot better at it. So I'll leave it at that.
Greg Fitzpatrick, Business Development Leader for Cochrane Supply and Engineering, and also the Executive Director for the Real Estate Cyber Consortium, REC. And I've been in business for about 30 plus years. Started off as a consulting engineer, worked for a couple large manufacturers in the sales role. Just like Ed, I needed to get out of the office and from in front of a computer and get out into the world. And I've enjoyed sales over the years. So looking forward to chatting with you guys.
My name is Nick Thioret, Head of Partnerships at Code Labs. I got my start in sales selling Cutco knives. If anybody in the audience knows what those are. Yeah, I started slinging Cutco knives as a sales professional way back. But then got my experience in controls actually in manufacturing, so working in plants on the control side, and I worked my way to the BAS side, building automation side, which has been very exciting, and yeah, looking forward to this conversation as well.
Thank you, team. Thank you. So, great panel. Let's get started. So, as you guys have all experienced quite a bit, let's start with attributes of successful salespeople in BAS. So, and we'll Nick, who's got the mic? Greg, you want to start with that? So Greg, let's talk about what are some of the, in your experience, not just with yourself, but others you've met, what are some of those attributes that you find make these salespeople successful in the BAS industry?
First of all, I think it's the ability to understand that we're in that people business. Right? So when you look at our industry, everyone can make controls, everyone can open dampers, change set points, and so forth and so on. But customers love to work with people that they like to be around and people that they trust. So I think that having the ability to develop relationships and trustworthy relationships and get people to look at you as their trusted advisor, right? The know-all, be-all when it comes to providing solutions for them. Whether you directly have the solution or you can connect the dots within the industry to find an answer and a solution for them. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, thanks. Could you pass it over to Ed?
Well, I think one good attribute is you like to be a problem solver. and a good listener. You got to be a good listener first. You have to think about it, and it's like solving a puzzle. So you have to have that curiosity, and it's fun to solve a problem for a customer, and it's really fun for them to say, thanks, I really appreciate that. So I think that's one of the best things you can do is understand is you're there to help them, and not necessarily, and also have to be able to work with a team or bring other people in to solve that problem. You can't just do it on your own, that's for sure. You always have to work with a team, and I've been very fortunate throughout my entire career to have a team to work with and to learn from and to work with.
Yeah, Julian, something to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say to add to what they've said, you're looking for people who have authenticity, people who are resilient, and people with grit. You know, the type of individuals who aren't afraid to take a risk and lose, and that only makes them come back even harder to learn, figure out why they lost, and try to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. Okay, Nick, what do you think?
Really good point said. Listening is one key thing, and I don't want to say what things have been said, but one of the key things that I say would certainly helped me was understanding the business of the customer, especially in the BAS sales when you're working across different verticals. Yes, the technology, the hardware might be the same, but what's key is understanding that business as well. So a hospital doesn't run like a commercial building. And although you might think that it's the same, it really isn't. They look at their systems differently. They look at their buildings differently. So really understanding that piece. And then, I've had the opportunity to sell both to direct end clients, but also partners, BAS contractors. And another key thing I would say is you want to, as a salesperson, you also almost want to be part of their team in a way. Sometimes I feel like I'm not even working for a code, I'm working for like this partner or this client because the relationship is that way. And I think putting yourself in that position, being a trusted advisor is really key for that.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And I just want to throw that word trust back at all of you. To me, the most successful salespeople in this space are the ones that are trusted by their customers. And when I say trusted, I mean, I know it because I go in and good salespeople can finish the sentence to their customers. Why? Not being rude, it's because they know their customer that well and their customer trusts them to speak for them. That's how you know when a salesperson is really entrenched in that account. I think trust, would you guys all agree, is one of those key factors. So
no, absolutely. And that comes from listening, like Ed said.
Right.
You have to listen to your customer. When you walk into your customer's office, the first thing or your first objective should be to learn their organization. Learn how their organization works. Learn who all the decision makers are so that you can figure out how to make that sell, whatever that solution is. You may be solving a small problem or a large problem, but you need to find out how those decisions are made. And not necessarily the person who could say yes, but the person who could derail the project is the person who could say no. So always try to identify who can say no when you're looking at your sales process. And also understand within that organization, there is someone within that organization who is an executive who is trained to see your sales process coming a mile away, right? So a lot of us have had sales training, the Sandler sales training, whatever sales training you've had, a lot of executives are being trained right now to look at your sales process and almost be 2 or 3 steps ahead of you, right? So know the business, our entire ecosystem, and know your customer's business and their decision-making process.
Yeah, that's a great point, Greg. And just to add on to that, one more point is know your product. Knowledge is power in sales. We are not unlike other industries where continuing education should be built into your sales performa. Those of you who are in the room today, congratulations. This is another step towards being a great salesperson because remember, our industry for the most part, they're stuck in little mechanical rooms. They don't get out much, right? We, the people who are here today, the people who can bring these solutions, we have to understand what we're talking about. So once we learn our customer, we become a trusted advisor, we also have to give good advice, okay? And I always like to tell people, it's not about the sale, the first sale that matters, it's about the last sale that matters, right? Because for all of you, you're in a relationship business, And the way to grow it is to build trust and then work from that trust and continue to keep that trust, right? So I think these are all key factors.
Yeah, can I add a little more color
Sure.
to that? Because I'm sure you guys are going to get tired of hearing my voice in a second. But when it comes to knowing your product, also know your team, your internal team, right? Because you're not always going to have all the answers. Always be trustworthy. And when someone asks you a question that you aren't familiar with and you can't provide the answer right then and there, don't look at it as a lost opportunity. Look at it as another opportunity to bring someone else within your organization in so that you get another meeting with your client. Don't walk into your client's office and shoot all your bullets on the first meeting, right? You want to set up a process and know that, hey, maybe their IT department needs to get involved. So let me go and bring my IT person in and create another meeting. So know your sales, your organization, not just sales, but your technical pieces behind you so that you know how many players you have behind you that can help you solve these problems.
Yeah, great point. Okay, let's move to the next topic. So looking at this, right, we talked about the attributes, of course. Now, but where do these people come from? What is their background? Where did they get their start in controls? Where are we finding these great salespeople that we're hiring today? So let's kick it to Ed. You want to start the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think they can come from anywhere. I kind of came from the field, and I really liked working with customers, right? I had great customers, and they appreciated what I was doing for them and keeping the buildings going. And I said, I'd like to do more, education, and I just had this natural affinity to sales. But I think that anybody, if you really enjoy working with people, I think you could come from multiple backgrounds. I've some people come from, I just interviewed a person recently who had an HR background, but they learned our business very well, and they're very good at it. So I think it's more personal attributes. I mean, you bring up a good point. You always have to be learning. I became a hero early on. I'm probably the oldest person in the room. But when Google came out, let me tell you, I became a hero. I'd get on the phone call with a customer, and they'd ask me a question, and I'd sit there and hit Google. And I'd probably have an answer for them, and they thought I was just brilliant. But my point is, you got to continuously do research and continuously learn. I spend a tremendous amount of time every week just still doing research on something I don't understand. It's a new term, and there's so many of them coming out. So I think it's more developing and taking that knowledge and then being able to pass it on to your customer and use it to help sell your products.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Ed, you also mentioned in our planning call, you had some advice for finding new salespeople from your personal life. Do you remember we talked about the HVAC guy?
Yeah. I mean, he's brought a good point. Today, I don't work on my own HVAC unit anymore because it's too daggone complex, right? You got to have a PC to do that. But I noticed that residential technicians tend to be very customer focused. I think they get some better training, and they have to, because dealing with a homeowner is a little bit tougher than dealing in a commercial environment many times. People are mad and it's hot. And I've found that the technicians that do that work, they have to love it, and they really have to like people to be in that business. And I've suggested to many of them that if they really want to do something different, to move into the commercial space, because we can use that type of attitude that's there.
Yeah, for sure. And to that matter, anybody in the trades that is working in that in other fields similar, they learn that how to build the relationship, how to build the rapport on a technical level. So they all could be great BAS salespeople given the opportunity.
I have to, you brought up pneumatics, right?
Yeah.
The cowboy, pneumatic cowboy.
Yep.
One here. And what we found was when I worked in the Honeywell branches, some of our best salespeople were pipe fitters, right? Because they interacted with customers every day. They did it in the boiler room, but they easily moved on up, right, into the executive level to be able to do that. And some of the best salesmen and best business managers in our industry actually came from the field that way because of their interpersonal skills. And again, natural, problem-solving capabilities.
Yeah. So Julian, if I could move it over to you, Julian's Smart Building Academy, of course, and they're training like so many new people coming into the industry, a lot of them for sales. So could you speak to where like this next generation of salespeople that you guys are seeing come through, where are these people coming from? What are their backgrounds like?
It's a potpourri of everything, right? And, I like to when I tell my own personal story, I tripped and fell into this industry. I didn't know it existed till after I got hired. And we're finding that the students we get are somewhat similar. Now, you do have some stories of I was a tech. There's a lot of stories of like my dad was in the industry or my mom worked for this OEM, so that's how I knew about it. But organizations are finding people with the right characteristics, like what we talked about in the first question you posed. What makes a great salesperson? Finding those characteristics. We can teach the industry. It is not difficult to teach HVAC theory, to teach building automation fundamentals, and that's what we do, right? And the companies I would say that are doing it best, they focus on finding the right DNA, making sure that that individual gets the foundational knowledge they need. So like from our perspective, BAS fundamentals and HVAC theory and HVAC fundamentals, and then ongoing continuous investment in their development. And that's both technical, so that they know about the products that they're out there trying to sell or the services, but it's also development of the individual from whether we want to call it sales skills or leadership skills, listening skills, communication skills, whatever you want to call it, for salespeople to be successful and to take them from, let's call it little baby salesperson to a pro, you have to make those levels of investment, and it does take some time.
And it requires training. It does. So cool. Let's kick it over to Nick. Nick, you're a great sales guy. Where'd you come from? Where did you come from, Nick?
Yeah. I would say, where I even got to get some skills about sales was actually at Cutco. I know I brought it up earlier, but one of the key things that I think worked well was just doing a lot of reps. And, where I come from is doing a lot of reps to contact people.
Wait, where'd you come from with a lot of reps? What were you doing?
At Cutco, you were cold calling people, getting real comfortable on the phone, and trust me, I was shaking on the phone on the first 100 cold calls I did, right? Shaking on the phone, but then after you get over the first 100, you start to get really comfortable, and then you start to get good. And that goes back to doing a lot of reps. I think for any new salesperson, I don't think it's specific to any industry. You have to be willing to do a lot of reps, take a lot of hits, be almost like you're gonna fail a lot, but that's okay, right? Being able to bounce back and try again, and I think that's a really key thing.
Oh yeah, you gotta like failure if you're a salesperson. It just goes with the flow, right, folks? But that's a part of the fun, right? That's what I like to tell people. It's kind of like a batting average in baseball. 300's pretty darn good, right? And that's just the reality of sales. It's most of the people you talk to, you might not get business from. But that's a part of your job. So, yeah, thanks, Nick. Okay, Greg, anything to add on this topic to close it out?
I'd just like to share a little bit about how I ended up at Cochrane.
Yeah, that's a good story.
Yeah, I was your customer. I was your customer back in, early 2000s, maybe late 90s?
Well, I called on you when you were at Train, remember?
Yeah, that's right.
You were at Train when I first called on you.
I'm about to age myself and date myself. But yeah, Scott and I go way back. And I remember when I was in a role as executive director of facilities, and he originally brought the Niagara line to me, right? And I looked at it, and everyone in our organization thought that it was sorcery, right? And back then, I came up with this initiative that we wanted to launch in the school district, and we call it the MSIP, the Multiple Systems Integrated Platform, right? Sounds real fancy.
That was your invention, though. That was all you, buddy. That was all you.
But when Scott brought the technology to me, and I was a consulting engineer originally, so controls was one of those things that was like this black box, and it was moving 90 miles an hour. So all engineers and consulting engineers just knew enough to be dangerous, right? But we never engulfed ourselves into the technology. And when Scott brought the technology to me, I was really, really interested. Fast forward probably 10 years later, we just kind of crossed paths again. And Scott just kind of said, hey, what are you doing these days? I heard you were working for yourself. I'd like for you to come and work for me. I go, really? So we went and had lunch and wrote a number on the napkin and said, hey, we'll figure it out when you get here. And 6 years later?
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, 6 years later. And you really have to have what I would consider a passion for our industry.
That's right.
Right? Because there's a lot of moving parts in our industry. So I just think that if you enjoy controls and enjoy the journey and enjoy the competitive nature of connecting all the dots and making that sale and, and letting the ink dry on a contract, I think BAS Sales is for you.
Yeah, Greg was executive director, as he mentioned, for a school district, very large one in Michigan, and had quite a challenging job. And when he took that role, he was working towards implementing this integrated platform. And in his office, he had a chalkboard, and he drew the coolest network architecture on a chalkboard I've ever seen. And of course, Dummy did it on he did it on a chalkboard, so it's gone forever because I'm sure somebody erased it. But going back to me as the employer here, when I thought about Greg and I was looking for somebody to help me, I was looking for somebody to help me educate engineers in the community. That picture that he drew on the chalkboard in my mind just referenced me back to the passion he had for the industry, how curious he was, not just about the big picture, but he got into every little detail, every protocol, every device. And that passion is why I didn't even hesitate in hiring him. Because when somebody has that kind of passion for the information in our industry, they make great salespeople because they're so valuable. There's so few of them, and that passion is a big reason why Greg works with us. And he was quickly, he's the executive director of REC. He's leading these CIOs of 5 billion square feet. Again, it takes passion. You gotta like this stuff if you want to get into it.
Customs.
That's right. So, all right, good stuff. Thank you. All right, moving on. So what are some of the challenges we face in developing these next great salespeople, and how do we overcome them? So, Julian, let's start with you because you're training a lot of them. So what do you guys find as some of these challenges and bringing them up to the recent?
So I would say what we see, and that's really challenging, is someone in their mid-20s today does not have the same social aptitude and skill set that, let's say, some of us had when we were 20s back in our day. And some of that is just a function of they grow up with technology first, communication just via text message kind of stuff or messaging platforms. They can they don't physically have to have a conversation in front of one another to get something negotiated, like a date to the prom, right? And now they're coming into the industry or coming into the workforce in a sales role where they have to sit across the desk. And let's say if I had to sit across from any of these guys and try and sell them, if I was 25 with that background, I would be pretty darn intimidated. So there is, again, there has to be an emphasis on technical training and personal development because it's a completely different world to them to have to go. Nick mentioned cold calling 100 times, in 2-3 hours and shaking, but he kept doing it. That's a pretty resilient person, right? So this goes back to what are the characteristics you need to look for, right? And he didn't quit. He kept going and he figured it out, sold some knives. We all go through that, and you have to find those key characteristics because the challenge isn't just training them technically now, it's also training them on how to communicate, listen, negotiate, and do all of these things on the phone, using email, and in person. And I think that last one is probably the toughest one for the next generation.
Yeah, personal communications and just in general can be a challenge with the next generation for sure. So let's kick it down to Nick. Nick, what are some of the challenges with the new team that you're working with at Code?
There's a variety of challenges, many that have been already mentioned, even some that I struggle with today still. But, I think asking the right questions is one that we tend to really try to focus on, and it's not an easy thing to train on, but it's something you have to do because you can listen. Listening is an important skill, but sometimes it's also asking those right questions. And even going a step further, you may ask the right question, you may listen to the customer, but did you really understand the depth of their answer. And this is something that, experience kind of teaches you this. And one of the challenges we have at Code, just like any other company, is, how can we make that learning cycle a bit faster? Can we document things a bit better? So I think a lot of the points that Julian mentioned as well are relevant. You need to find people that are not afraid to just go in and make that contact. One of my favorite sayings is sales is a contact sport. It's just like football, but instead of physical contact, it's people contact. You got to talk to people, and that goes away. That fear goes away. You just have to kind of work with some people sometimes to get them there.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So Greg, some more to add about the challenges?
Yeah, I think I think one of the challenges is identifying who's a farmer and who's a hunter. Meaning, your strategic sales, your long-term sales opportunities are usually for people who have those personalities to be nurturing, right? They can take their time. They can be strategic about identifying the players, the key players who are in the industry. They know the industry. They feel more comfortable doing that long-term sale. And people who think of sales more like a contact sport, right? I want to get out in front of them. Let me solve this problem for you. Let me get the order. And I think every organization should make sure that they identify who are the farmers and who are the hunters.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Ed, close this one out.
Yeah, I want to call out the industry a little bit, because when I came along, I had mentors. I had 4 or 5 people. As an industry and corporations, everybody's cutting back. And I think we have to realize that we owe it to new people coming in to help mentor them. You just don't learn this thing from a book. You get good training, but you have to watch other people do it. You have to get the nuances of doing that. And I think we all, and that's something I get a lot of excitement, a lot of fun doing mentoring now, because I get to do a lot of that. And I think we all have to think about in our companies, even if you're a small company, that doesn't mean you can't sit with the owner, understand what they do, get some of their experience. You sit with the financial people, you work with the people out in the field. So I think we really don't spend enough time doing mentorship programs to develop people. We throw them out there and say, sell, here's your quota, just go do it.
Yeah.
And they think it's easy just because you went and did spin selling or some other selling school that you can do this. So
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. I think we've kind of lost some of that, and we have to get back to that. I think
Agreed.
we owe it to the new generation to do that, because we all had that when we came in.
Yeah, agreed, Ed. And one of the challenges I know I'm facing, or Cochrane Supply is that today, like when I came in the industry, I was taught the industry by people who had been in it for 30 years before me. And then it took them like 5-10 years to teach it to me. It was not, I did not get this right away. It took a long time. And then they didn't just teach me like the engineering part of it. They taught me the process. They taught me the flow. They taught me what the other businesses did and why they acted the way they did. And anyways, it took me a long time. What I'm finding today with my new sales reps, Cochrane's new sales reps, is they don't want to give us that time. They want to be superstars overnight. So it's a whole different type of ballgame with the new people coming into your business. Mentoring is super important. Unfortunately, though, we have to mentor them in a year. We don't get the 5 years like we used to, like our industry used to give us. And I think that's just the new normal. I don't, I would like to go back in time and say, we should do it the right way, but I don't think we're going to be able to. And I find that a challenge. Cochrane Supply, we're shifting how we look at things simply because that is a sign of the times. It's just, I hate to say it, we've become an impatient society. And everybody is. It's not just the new generation. It's even adults that have been working for a while. They're impatient for their success. We're not going to fix this. We just have to take it as a challenge and understand it each as a business, I believe, and adjust accordingly. So that's my take on it. Anywho, moving on. Next topic. Okay, so going into selling, going into the field, going into the game, if you may, what are some of the tactics and strategies that these top BAS salespeople use? Ed, you got the mic. Why don't you kick it off?
Research. before you go anywhere, nowadays it's pretty easy with LinkedIn. You get, I get called into meetings many times and they say, hey, I want you to go give a presentation. And I say, well, who's the audience? Well, I don't know, it's a bunch of people from this university. I said, well, who from the university? What's the background? Fortunately now, again, with LinkedIn, you can go find out a lot about people. You can find out what they like, and then you might find out what they don't like. So I think that's one of the most important skills you can do, and get prepared and understand who you're talking with before you go in.
Agreed. You mentioned looking the company up, understanding what the company does, understanding what their goals are prior to walking in and pitching anything, right, Ed? Yeah. Yep, for sure. Greg, something to add about some tactics and strategies?
Yeah, I think you need to understand exactly what the problem is, right? Are you trying to solve one problem, or are you trying to solve a problem that's multifaceted, and how it affects the potential customer's organization, right? You have to look for what I call their WIFM, W-I-F-M. What's in it for me, right? That's a part of understanding their pain point. What keeps them up at night? How soon do they have to solve this? What if they don't solve it? Who are they going to have to answer to? All of those are important dots to connect before you walk into a meeting with a potential solution. And I would always advise, like I said before, don't shoot all your bullets in the first meeting. Right? Because you want subsequent meetings, because at the end of the day, you may not be the only person that's having an opportunity to talk to this client about solving that problem, right? So it's almost like going into an interview, right? You're part of the last three, right? So once your turn is done, it's done. But I always like to go in and say, hey, let me give them just enough and leave one unanswered question out there so I can get another call in case there's additional competition that's out there, and I can show them that I'm not solving your problem in a vacuum. I have an entire team behind me who can solve the problem. And if your customer's IT department is involved, for instance, then maybe we get another meeting with their IT department and my IT team, because I'll put my IT guys up against anyone in the country, right? But if you try to answer those questions on your first meeting, then you may not get the result that you're looking for. So be very strategic in how you approach each and every customer, because each and every customer has a different story, right? They have a different issue and they solve their problems differently.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Could you pass it to Julian? Other way. We're going to go Julian next. All right, Julian. So Smart Building Academy, you train salespeople. You train them on tactics and strategies. What are you training them on?
So at a high level, like I had shared earlier, we start with making sure that they have a technical foundation, right? Because all the strategy in the world gets blown up as soon as you lose credibility in front of a customer, right? So going back to something I think Ed said too about just being honest. If you get asked a question and you don't know the answer, don't try to fake it. Just say, I don't know, but I'll get you an answer tonight, tomorrow, and hit that deadline. But anyways, foundational technical knowledge, and then from there we explore how to sell in the different scenarios that we find most commonly in our industry. So there's selling in the context of a construction job where there's plans, specs, bids. There's selling in the context of service. So this might be an existing customer of your organization. They already have a system in place. It's maintenance, it's repair, it's enhancements, software upgrades, etc. And then there's the conversation around value-based selling, being able to go into a client's organization and invent the project and demonstrate an ROI for that project and educate them on how to get there. And so we walk through all of those different types of sales scenarios, and what I'll say is, just like with techs, we find some like to gravitate towards, let's say, construction, some like to go service. We find that people exploring sales careers tend to do a little bit similar too. Some like to gravitate towards the plan spec world, and some like to gravitate towards service and value-based selling where there's more creativity. It just depends on who you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. And Nick, something to close it out with?
Thanks.
What's your tactics, Nick?
So I think generally speaking, one of the trends that we've seen at Code certainly is that the person purchasing technologies has changed a little bit to, from the, instead of being your typical FM, now it's kind of going up one extra level. And that means that the conversation that you're having as a salesperson needs to change as well. You don't need to just talk to the game of the FM, but also the leadership team. And what I've seen work really well, what we've seen work really well at Code is have conversations, do that research, talk to everybody you can at that customer before you have that big, call it leadership pitch or meeting. But then when you do have that meeting with leadership, make it a story. Make it a story as to where they are today, what you're providing, what you're proposing is going to solve for them, and what the expected outcome or the end outcome is going to be for them in terms of value to their business. And I think that kind of brings in a lot of topics that we talked about here today, but crafting that really good story is, I think, really important. It's certainly something that I've seen help actually drive some sales forward.
Yeah, so, Nick, so Code, you guys have done a fantastic job with C-level sales. And as most of the industry is moving into cloud selling, if you may, that C-level is where the sale is done, correct? I mean, as a cloud provider, it's very hard to sell a cloud to a facilities person because they got to go to IT, they got to go to, all those. Can you speak a little bit to that? How do you guys get to that C-level? What do you say to them? Like, could you give us a little insight on that?
Yeah, at the C-level, I think it's not as technical, of course, as an FM conversation may be. You really got to talk about their enterprise. And, the way to think about it is like a CRM, right? When a enterprise salesperson is selling a CRM, there's a big value there, and they're talking about the enterprise account as a whole, the value it's going to drive for that account. Same thing goes for this. We're kind of getting into this space. You're talking about not just a building, not just a handful of buildings. You're talking about the entire business itself. So going back to earlier points made, really understanding the business that you're talking to, who you're pitching to. And I'm not just saying, they sell cars, they sell tires. Not that. I'm talking like really understand how the money flows in their organization. That's a really key thing. And then, as it was said before, who are those key stakeholders that will need to be involved? It's a C-level discussion, but IT is going to need to be involved, right? And you better have good responses and a plan for that particular division of their business when they execute this. You got to make it easy for them, right? To execute on something like this.
Nick, I have a theory. I don't see any C-level people. No, okay, none in here. Jeannie's not in here. So I have a theory. You ready? Tell me if it's true or not. Okay? C-level people fall for the shiny thing. Is that true, Nick? Do you find that the prettier pictures you show, the more effective they are at the C-level? Be honest, Nick.
I think they certainly help tell the story. You know what I mean?
So, guys, I just want to say, when you get to the C-level, right, Nick? Pretty picture self. I
think I'm walking into a trap, maybe.
Don't try to sell them on BackNet, okay?
Yeah.
They're not going to buy it. Get the prettiest picture you have of their building and the systems within and say, this is what I'm going to give them. Oh, that's what I want, Make sure they can take it with them, too, on their phone to show their friends, like, this is what I'm buying. Check it out. So, yeah.
I thought Jeannie articulated what she needed. I thought she did a great job.
Yeah.
And I do think the difference is, I think CIOs are learning about this, and
yeah.
I was quite impressed with her knowledge in general, because she has to deal with a lot of other things other than just what's going on in the building. So I think what you're going to find is the C-suite's changing, and there's almost like multiple C-suites now, right? You look at big corporations, you've got enterprise level, you got the corporate level, you have department level.
Yes.
So I think you have to find that right level, but I think that they're becoming much more educated. And I got a sense from Jeannie that she's seen it all, and she knew what to do to make a choice.
She probably bought a pretty picture first.
Yeah. The way she articulated today, I was quite impressed. She had thought what their issues were and solved that problem. So I thought that was really good to see.
Such a good point, you guys, and I agree with that 100%. When you hear the CIO term on the C-level, that's a different C-level than the typical C-level, right?
Yeah, let me add something to that, because within REC, the Real Estate Cyber Consortium, it's made up of CIOs, CTOs, and CISOs, right?
What's a CISO?
Chief Information
Security Officer,
right?
Thank you, Greg.
And that group of people, they talk about selling their ideas to the C-suite, right? So their C-suite within the IT is a level below the CEO and the other C-suite.
A lot of C-levels.
Yeah, so when you go to the technical C-suite, they're more concerned with solving problems than the CEO. They would love the pretty pictures, shiny things, ROI, the money, the ROI as it pertains to whatever solution you provide. Yeah. So there's a distinction there, and be very, very careful when you're out there selling to know how that organization is structured, right? Because you may have two different levels of CIOs, CTOs who are involved, and then your CEO may be the ultimate stakeholder who can say no, right? Always look for that person who can say no.
Yeah, thank you. Julian wanted to close it out.
Yeah, just on this topic of C-suite buying the prettiest picture.
Yeah.
I'll share with you my perspective on that. From what I've experienced and done or seen others do, it's not, I think that takes credit away from the C-suite and away from the sales people involved. Because I think what it is, and I always, in my organization, I share with my team, when you go into that level, it has to be doggy, piggy, bunny, simple. If you cannot tell a story that a 5-year-old can understand, that CEO is not going to give you the time of day because they don't have time to sit there and listen to you explain everything for 90 minutes. The organization or the salesperson with the most compelling, easy to understand story is the one who's going to win at that level.
So I don't know what the C-level.
30 minutes.
Yeah.
Right, and to your point, like the CISOs and the others that you were describing who still have to go up, you're helping them tell the most compelling, concise story. Doggy, piggy, bunny.
You have to arm them and train them.
So going back to what I said originally, simple, pretty pictures is what Julian's saying. No, he's right.
Been sold on
he's right.
Pictures
No, don't underestimate him, as Ed mentioned, because like Jeannie showed all of you, I mean, she would rock your world, right? You come in there with your stuff, try to sell it to her, and she'd be like, "Oh, dude," she'd just laugh at you. So there are very educated people in the end user space, and we have to respect that for sure. So, okay, guys, so we hit our time cap. We knew we would. We could go all day, of course. Great panel. Just some closing thoughts from each of you to close out the conversation. And Julian, you got the mic. Anything to add for the audience about the topic overall?
I would just say, everybody in the room is a leader in this industry. So you have a responsibility to mentor, whether it's formally or informally, those folks that are new. If you have folks, whether they're technicians, sales, or any other role, you have a responsibility to help them develop, right? Technically and with the soft skills or interpersonal skills that they need to succeed. So you do that for yourself, find a way to help somebody else and encourage them to pay it forward as well.
Thanks, Julian. Ed, final thoughts.
Do what's right for your customer, then you're doing what's right for your company, and you're doing what's right for yourself.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Make sure that you develop your social network on LinkedIn. It's very important. It's your online reputation, right? And your online story. You're telling the story. Every time you post something on LinkedIn, you're telling your professional story. So make sure that you're very cognizant of what you're posting on LinkedIn, and make sure that you network and use that tool because it's a powerful tool.
I would say there's never been a better time to be in sales. Just like any high-paying profession, whether it's legal, being a doctor, those things take 8 years to be a doctor. Well, guess what? If you put in the time for 8 years to be a salesperson, your income cap will be unlimited. That's what we're in it for too. Helping customers, delivering value, and it's no better time to be in it. So.
And I'll just close it out with some advice my dad gave me, which was really simple. And he had 30 years plus in the industry. And he said, son, do what you say you're going to do and never poop in your customer's hat. And we'll leave it with that. Thank you, guys. No break.